That noon, the dented tin cup rolled with a clack outside the barn. A strange woman knocked at the door with a rusty pail, and the man pointed into the dark. Up in the hayloft came the sound of faint breathing. The west was as still as a cocked gun. Stay and see. Who will step forward, who will run, and where that cup will end up hanging. High noon. The harsh sun dulled the barn grass to the color of smoke-cured hide. The dented tin cup rolled against the wood wall in an even, dry rhythm. Clack, then clack. The wind was weak, but enough to push. At the bottom of the cup a smear of cloudy rainwater, the color of dissolved ash. The bent rim was faintly sharp, the mouth twisted to one side, like something stepped on long ago. Old handprints marked its sides, blooming into gray rings. No smell, only the sound of impact. I sat on the stone step a few paces from the barn's eaves. The rope was coiled under my heel, the outer strands already frayed. The barn's dark latch rattled lightly with the wind. The plank wall had gaps, sunlight slipping through as thin blades stabbing the dust in the straw. A fly landed on the cup's mouth, clung, then flew off. Stillness again, then clack. In the yard the wooden trough was empty, only a bright streak of water left. The horse outside flicked its ears, struck a hoof once, then stopped. The dirt road into the yard was full of old wheel tracks, deep grooves, edges broken, dust settled on them like a layer of chalk. At the east fence the wire shook, making a fine scraping hiss like a needle on a can's edge. The woman appeared from the edge of the cotton bush, narrow shoulders, back straight like someone keeping something from falling. She carried a bundle of dull-colored rags and a rusty pail. The pail's handle was wrapped in cloth, the knot neat and tight. The hem of her dress held dried mud, flaking off in small bits with each step. It was mud from some other day, not this morning's, mud that had traveled with her a while. She slowed as she stepped into the shadow of the awning. The shadow was short, the sun still pressed on her back. The cup kept rolling. It touched her foot, then stopped, mouth up to the sky. One shoot it. He didn't ask where from, didn't ask what name, only glanced at the pail, at her dry hands. Short nails, dirt trapped in thin black lines. No ring. On her left wrist, an old scrape, skin just healed, darker than the rest. He jerked his chin toward the barn. His index finger came up, then pulled back, like he didn't want to point at anyone directly. Flat voice. Barn. A pause. We heard dry leaves turn in the fence. When it's done, you get paid, he added without raising his voice. No trace of curiosity. She nodded, set the pail on the step. The cloth-wrapped handle touched stone with a muted chong, smaller than it should be. Maybe there was no water inside. Maybe something heavier. She laid the rags on the pail's mouth, parted them with her fingers, counted with her eyes, didn't touch the cup. He opened the door a little more, enough for light to cut across the table inside. On it lay a wooden-handled dagger, blade turned inward. A single rusty iron hook on the wall, holding one hat, dust thick on its crown. He wasn't wearing it, though the sun was high. She stood straight, asked for nothing more, told nothing more. Her shadow split the beam of light on the floor in two. A sparrow on the door beam startled, shot up, leaving one small feather spinning down. The cup rolled again, a different gust passing under the awning. It tapped my boot toe. I nudged it back toward the wall. The clack stayed the same. The sun shifted. The light stripe on the wall moved with it. Her shadow and the pails merged for a moment, then pulled apart. I need work, she said, clearer this time, like a closing statement, not pleading, like delivering news. He nodded. Barn, he repeated. His finger touched the doorframe, drew back, left a mark of dust on the tip. She turned, lifted the pail with both hands, avoiding the handle rubbing her skin. The bottom brushed her heel, smearing a new mark on the dress. She stepped over the cup, didn't kick it, didn't dodge. It brushed her hem, then stopped for good. I stood, took the rope with me, walked alongside her a stretch, speaking to no one. The barn stood still, door half closed. Her, mouth up, catching another speck of dust. It drifted around in the cloudy water, then stuck at the bent rim. The water likely wasn't cool anymore. The sun had warmed it enough for the taste of tin to fade. He walked slow into the yard. His shadow stretched, stopped a few paces from her. He didn't touch the door, stood aside, letting another step in first if they wished. His palm turned inward, thumb not hooked at his belt. The stance of someone not yet set on sending away or keeping. "Start inside," he said. "Left side, shovels leaning on the post." She nodded, still didn't ask how much, didn't ask when to stop, only lifted the pail for the third time. Her arm shook once, then steadied. I tilted my head. From inside the barn came the faint crackle of wood contracting in the heat. The dust on the beams trembled, sounding like someone lightly shaking a small sieve. There was the smell of old cattle salt clinging in the corner of the trough, the smell of animal hide that hadn't dried right. She stepped in. The tip of her boot touched the floor, struck once, then again, then silence. He didn't follow. Stood outside a moment, staring straight ahead, eyes unblinking, then went back to the house. The door closed halfway, the same as when it opened. The latch made no sound, only wood touching wood, dry. I stayed in the yard, listening to the rag slide over the plank surface, the rhythm even. When it slowed, I knew she was changing hands. When it quickened, I knew she'd hit damp straw. When it stopped, I knew she was lifting the pail. Those things spoke clearer than words. The sun shifted. The stripe of light on the eaves passed over the cup. The dent caught the glare, sharp as a thin blade. In the sky, a stray cloud dissolved before it could hide the sun. The wind weakened. No more clack. The cup lay still, its shadow warped round, the edge of it trembling in the heat. The barn cat appeared without sound, crossed by, sniffed the cup, didn't drink. It looked into the barn's door crack for a moment, then left, arched under the sun's edge. 3 bits of straw stuck to its fur, switch for a pail now full of dust. Her breathing had evened. The cloth on the pail's handle left a fresh mark on her wrist. She glanced quickly into the yard, stopping at the cup. Eyes touched it once, not long, then turned back in. The door closed. I picked the cup up to test it. Light, colder than I thought. The sharp bent rim left a thin white line on my skin. I put it back where it had been, mouth turned toward the barn. Felt like it was facing the way it was meant to. Things like that should stay where they are until someone needs them. A thin drift of dust fell like mist, sank into the sun. The rag sound came again, wetter now. Maybe she'd poured some water from the pail. Maybe not. I didn't look, didn't need to know. On the eaves, the smell of tin faded, giving way to dry wood and cracked hide. He leaned a shoulder against the post, hands folded at his stomach, thumb rubbing the other thumbnail, making a small sound. His eyes no longer aimed at the barn. He looked across the empty yard toward the fence. The wire still hissed a short note when the wind changed. Maybe he listened to it to measure the wind, or to fill the silence. After a while he went back inside. The door closed halfway again. Sunlight cut the edge of the door into a new thin blade. I stayed with the cup, not because it mattered, because it was saying the right thing for this noon. Someone had knocked. Someone had opened a hand's width. A job had begun without any oath. Noon stretched like a taut rope, didn't snap, didn't sag. Somewhere on the yard's edge, a crow's hoarse call. No answer. In the barn, the shovel touched the floor again. Short. Then the rag wrung out, drops falling to the boards. Tap, tap. The cup lay still, mouth up. The cloudy water thinned but hadn't dried. I stood, smoothed the rope in my hand. The sound of hooves far off on the road wasn't close enough to count the steps. The wind turned again. The wire stopped hissing, The sun shoved another finger's width west. She didn't come out. He didn't call. Each tended their own part. I left the yard, walking along the fence. When I looked back, the cup was track on the boards, leaving behind a damp path running to the darkest spot under the crossbeam. Each time she wrung it, 2 drops fell, never off beat. The shovel stood against the post, its paint flaked, its edge worn, sheen dulled like a fingernail stained with lime. She used it like someone who knew the weight, sliding dry dung into piles, tossing it up, never striking hard. On the second day she switched sides, still kept her back to the wall. The pail blocked a ladder again, this time with a saddle pole laid across the 3rd step. I stood on the eaves, the rope running through my hand, heard the broom's steady swish, broken by the light groan of loose joints in the wood. He passed along the eaves mid-morning, didn't go in. His eyes swept over her hands, paused a second at the rubbed red on her wrist, then left, said nothing. On the 3rd day, she moved the straw piled against the wall with both arms, each bundle held in the crook of her fingers, not dropping a stem. The chaff drifted in the sunlight like fine salt. She pulled a cloth over her mouth. A line of sweat slid from her temple down her jaw, settling in the hollow of her throat. The pail still blocked the ladder. The broom handle, cracked, splintered off a few thin threads that clung to her hem like light burrs. She didn't brush them away. Mid-morning, I heard the ladder give a faint thock, not wind. She stopped for a single beat, eyes not lifting. Her right hand pressed the pail's rim down. The way up got a little heavier. The barn cat leapt over the pail's mouth, slipped past the broom handle, reached the 2nd step, glanced into the dark above, then turned back. It dropped down soft as cloth, went straight out the door. She looked after it briefly, then bent to scrub the trough at her old pace. On the eaves, the dented tin cup still lay where it had been, its warped mouth catching the slant sun. The water inside had sunk to a ring of dry foam. The wind carried the faint taste of tin through the heat. I turned the rope once, tied a knot, for no reason, only to keep my hands busy while listening to the rag. 4th afternoon, late sun. The tin roof sweated hot, shifted, lying straight along the step. Her eyes stayed on the dark above, her mouth stayed shut. He appeared just then at the barn door, his shadow cut across the light. She glanced at him as quickly as looking at a hook on a wall, didn't ask, didn't explain. He looked at the broom lying along the step, then at the pail, didn't ask, only let his gaze travel up to the tin roof where the sound had come from. His ear tilted slightly, like a man used to measuring sound through bone. "Tin's hot," he said, as if to the air, then turned away. She stayed. A strand of hair slipped from her scarf, stuck to her lip. She blew it free without using her hand. Another straw fell. No sound. She drew the pail closer to the step, the scrape of iron on wood making a thin hiss. From the eaves I could see the 3rd step was worn hollow with age. Old footprints, smaller than a man's. Could be a farm boy's, could be not. I heard a breath inside the barn change pace. Not sure whose. Could be hers after swallowing. Could be something above. Evening spilled through the roof seam. The light moved off the ladder's foot, climbed the wall, then died like a flame burning its last oil. She took up the shovel again, turned her back on the ladder, swept along the old track. The rhythm matched the morning's, but each time the blade touched the floor, the handle trembled a little, just enough for a man at the door to see with his eyes. By day's end, she rinsed the rag in the barn trough. The pail's water turned murky, fine bubbles trembling. She wrung it 3 times, exact, hung it on a nail 2 handspans from the ladder. Drops fell in 5 even spots on the floor. She left the pail blocking the ladder before turning off the lamp. The glass was yellowed, the wick long, the light trembling before it steadied. The ladder's shadow fell at a slant on the wall, cutting across her back. That night, He left the eaves before it was fully dark. The horse wore no saddle, only a bridle. Its nose drew in dirt, let out a sigh. He locked the house door lightly, then took the path outside the fence. No instructions, no backward glance. In the barn showed each step of the ladder, darker in the middle. The second step gave a thunk. The third was silent. The fourth took a little longer breath, as if under a small weight. She climbed. Her arm didn't touch the wall. The cup's lip brushed a step once, the dry sound of tin like a spoon on a pot's edge. She paused half a beat, switched hands. In the loft, the hay lay in uneven mounds. A roof slit cut a fine line of light, dust floating there like fry in a dry creek. A sound, small. Another, like a fingernail on wood. Not pain, just presence. She sat, set the cup in a place not quite light, not quite shadow. From the eaves, I watched the light's edge, and saw only her arm draw back, the elbow tucked tight to her side. Shh! No sound, only the shape of her mouth. Then stillness. She came down slower than she'd gone up. The third step this time made the faintest sound. Her hand brushed the ladder's side, leaving a damp mark 3 fingers wide. On the ground, she pulled the pail back to block the ladder as before, set the broom across. The lamp went out. The barn settled into the smell of hot straw and cooled metal. Outside, the dark deepened a shade. I stayed until my eyes took to the dark, heard soft breathing above, long, even, broken by a dry snuffle, like a child just asleep. No crying. The cat didn't come in again. It lay curled under the step, ears pricked. When the insects rasped, it didn't lift its head. When the wind turned, it opened one eye, then closed it. The night passed through the barn like someone cutting across the yard, not wanting to leave a trace. Morning, I was tying the trough rope when he called. Not loud, just enough to cross the bright yard. Come here. I went around the barn. Behind it, the wood wall was dark and damp, the smell of earth cooler. The shadow here kept the night's breath longer than other places. He stood at the edge of the tin roof, where the last rain's water had left a pale crust. His hand rested on a post, the knuckles browned, his eyes aimed at the ground. 2 children sat on an old plank there, shoulders straight, hands not reaching. His lips closed, his chin tilting toward the shade, like giving room to stand. She stood 2 steps away, back to the wall, hands gripping the front of her dress to steady the tremor. Not a tremor from fear, but from knowing there was no hiding anymore. I caught the smell of cheap soap in the child's hair. That smell hadn't been in this barn for months. A fly landed on the cup's rim, walked the circle of the dent, then flew away. Above, the tin roof was still. No tap. The air held. We didn't ask. They didn't speak. After a while, he shifted his weight, the heel of his boot dragging a short line in the dirt. That line cut across the shadow of the plank where the 2 sat. She left the wall, stepped forward, bent down to one side, her left palm flat on the plank, covering one screw head in the middle board. The older girl tilted her head slightly toward the woman's hand, didn't lean in all the way, only allowed her hair to touch skin. The younger looked at the cup again, as if measuring how long until the water in it dried. Wind passed behind the barn, hit the corner of the masonite with a small fap. He lifted his eyes from the ground, looked at me. No signal, no request, just the way people divide silence evenly between them. I bent, picked up the cup. The dense edge cut cold into my thumb. I tilted it slightly so the last water ran to one side, held into a bead, set it back between them. The bead didn't fall. The younger's eyes followed it, the older with a short fop. The barn lamp had been out since night, so everything was shapes of dark and light. The loaf the color of earth, the bottle a dirty silver, the broom handle still lying crosswise at the ladder like a loose bar. He stood, stepped back to the door. His fingers found the wood latch outside, pulled it in. A dry thock of the peg in its old hole. A faint scrape as the iron catch slid into its groove. The door went quiet. From the eaves I saw his hand leave the latch, dust marking a pale streak across the knuckle. She didn't run out, didn't pound the door. I heard the barn's breathing change, slower now, as if a large chest had taken on another layer. Not like a lock for keeping in, more like a latch set against the wind, so what was inside wouldn't leak sound. After a while, the faint shift of straw above, a cough swallowed back, small. She bent, set the broom lengthwise along the ladder, leaving one step open enough for a small foot to slip through if it had to. Then she pulled the rusty pail out to stand at an angle to the door, not blocking it entirely. Those motions carried no words. People used to living where noise rises easy, know how to place things so sound stays still. By noon the air stood. The barn was dim as sunlight through coarse cloth. The loaf was missing a piece, crumbs fallen in 2 bits on the floor. The water bottle sat lower, a damp ring on its side marking where a child's hand had held it. Her arm swept a dry line across her cheek, leaving a pale streak in the fine dust. I leaned a shoulder to the eaves post, the rope looped on a nail, hanging there. The latch was as it had been, its wooden head worn round with years. No hand touched it, but the air around it kept a faint human warmth. By afternoon the wind turned. The fence wire hissed short, then stilled. He stood in the yard, body angled, eyes measuring where the sun struck the strip of dirt before the door. Didn't call, didn't ask. The door stayed still, but the barn's silence had lost its edge. The tread in the loft was even, without snatch, locked from the outside, but not to close, to say, "It's my turn to take the to its side." He came up, stopped, didn't lift his head, his eyes fixed on a point in the loft. Not the ladder, not the beam. Somewhere he could see his sister for a blink. They didn't leave, as if blinking would lose her. I lowered the splitting knife, held out my hand. The cup was cold, cold in the way metal drinks night down to its core. The dense edge pressed a fine, sharp line into my skin. He didn't let go at once. His small fingers gripped the rim for a beat, then released. His hand was so cold I felt my own heat pull into it. I didn't ask for who, didn't ask why. I tilted the cup enough to see the bottom dry. A thin line traced the dent, slow as a snail not ready to leave its shell. A breeze from the eaves brushed the water ring into a new shape. On the step, she stood in the doorway's shadow. Her hands clenched her dress. Her chin turned aside, not looking straight, as if not to make the boy falter. Inside the barn, the third ladder step gave a very faint thock. The sound made his eyes widen slightly. Not from fear, from hearing the rhythm of the one he was watching. He drew his hands back to his chest, fingertips curled loosely, as if still holding something unseen. I set the cup down on the stone step beside me, didn't push it back, didn't keep it, just left it there, mouth up, taking the gray light of the morning clouds. The dent caught the light, sharp as a scar with memory. He stepped back, shoulders drawn. His head never left the spot above. There was someone, very softly, smiling inside. Not with the mouth, with the way breath changed pitch. He stepped into the yard then, stopped at the edge of shadow. He saw the cup, saw the boy, saw me, didn't change his expression. He took one slanted step so his shadow wouldn't block the light at the door. Didn't say all right, didn't say come in. But after that step, the boy turned his back, walked slowly, feet touching ground as if counting each grain of sand. She laid her hand on his shoulder the moment he crossed the threshold. Didn't grip, just set it there, like putting a lid on a pot. Water. The old well. The worn wood pulley creaked like a sleepy child. He lowered the bucket, rope sliding through a groove darkened by years of hands and water. The sound of water touching the bucket's side was the lightest in the night but clearest of all. He drew it up, the bucket heavy, drops falling like strings of beads breaking at the rim. He washed the cup in both hands, didn't scrub hard but thorough, turned it over, sent water through the dent, rotated so the stream struck the warped spot. Each time his fingers passed the pressed edge, gooseflesh rose. With a fingernail, he traced an old scratch, as if reading another sentence with the tip. Well water, sharp cold. His breath broke into small clouds. I stood in the wall's shadow, watching, didn't step forward. He didn't look around, just kept washing. When the pulley's sound stopped, only the water from the cup still poured to the dirt, making a dark streak. He set the cup upside down on the well's wood post to drain, shook his hand once, small enough not to scatter drops. A cricket called near the wall, went silent when he picked up the cup again. He walked to the kitchen, set the cup on the wooden table where pots were usually left to dry. Mouth down, dent turned toward the wall, as if to hide its eye. No towel, no kettle beside it. He turned away, left the kitchen. His shadow crossed the mildewed white wall, vanished into the hallway's dark. The night thinned further. I heard the fence wire twitch once, then still. In the barn, a body shifted in the loft straw. The sound light, but real. No one came down the ladder. The kitchen door went dark. The well stayed quiet. Morning. The sun lifted over the slope behind the house, spilled light onto the windowsill. I went into the kitchen to get the cup. The wooden table was clean. The dark watermark from last night had dried, a curve like a half moon. The cup wasn't there. I looked around. Skillet hooks, the nail where the towel hung, the lower cupboard. Nothing. The morning smell stayed plain. Flour, old smoke, a little damp earth. No voices in the kitchen. The door to the edge, let the wood bite a faint mark in the skin. Said nothing. In the yard below, the sound of a hammer striking a fence post. He was adding a crossbar to the east fence. The hammer's rhythm steady, not hurried. Each strike like a dry sentence, ending with a period. No sentence explained why the cup had made such a roundabout path. But its being here this morning said enough. I looked at the cup one last time before stepping down. The dent turned inward, hiding a sliver of the child's face if he rolled over. The cover wasn't thick, didn't need to be. I stepped lightly, so the third rung didn't sound. Outside, wind passed, carrying the smell of freshly drawn well water. The hammer fell again, fixing something into its place. The cup was in its place now, too. No promise made, no declaration given, only a ring of dried water in the kitchen and silence in the loft. Rumor came before the wind. At the market they said someone was asking the way here, wearing a black-brimmed hat, no chin strap. At the forge, someone found a damp cigarette butt, the cheap fiber kind, the tip flattened as if bitten. Those bits blew with the dust, but each morning I saw something more certain. The horse tie at his fence was loosened by half a turn. Last night's knot had been right-handed tight. By morning it was a slip knot, loose as a trap laid open. Faint boot marks where the ground was hard, heel not deep. Someone had stood there a while, then left. I retied it, changed to a different knot, pulled the rope, heard the flax hiss across my hand. Didn't call anyone. He came to the eaves, looked over the tie rope, didn't bend, just let his eyes follow the wood edge, where a new scratch the length of a pinky nail marked the post. He rubbed it once with a cloth. The mark didn't go, only paled. She swept the yard. The broom passed close to the fence, never touched the rope. The rusty pail stood by the step, its cloth-wrapped handle turned toward the wall. The two children didn't come out. Their shadows mixed with the lofts. Their sound was the press and release of straw. That afternoon the wind shifted. The fence wire hissed short, then went still. At the east fence corner I saw handle creaked, a familiar sound. The rope ran through its dark groove, sliding smooth. She braced one foot on the well's rim, pulled even, no jerk. When the water touched the lip, it threw up a few heavy drops. She didn't flinch. He stood on the eaves, left hand on the post frame, not folded, not pocketed. This time, his eyes didn't slide away. He looked straight. She looked up. Their eyes touched for a beat. Not long. Enough to change the meaning of how both were standing. The dented tin cup sat ready on the well's rim, half full. Someone had poured before, not her. Small bubbles clung to the dent, ran a thin curve. She didn't wipe the rim, didn't turn the dent inward, left it that way, half the sky looking in. The two children stood in the barn doorway, hands hooked over the wood edge, the older holding the younger's fingers, as if holding a leaf about to fall. The turn was here. No more hiding, no more covering. Water in the sun, cup in plain sight, eyes going straight and holding. She drew another bucket, poured into a tin basin. The water fell in steady lop-lop. She rolled her sleeves, the water cutting gooseflesh into her arms. Said nothing. He left the post, stepped down one eave step and stopped. Didn't step in, didn't turn away, only kept his shadow off the well's rim. The cat lay in the well's shadow, tail sweeping dust. It looked at the cup, yawned long, shut its eyes. What needed seeing lay where all could see it. No need to stalk. The first rain came like a wet blanket pressing the yard. The old tin roof rattled hard, water running in ropes, pounding the iron basin at the corner, boom, boom, like someone keeping time. The smell of earth drinking rose stronger than the smell of damp straw. On the second morning of rain, he climbed the barn roof, not hurried, the nails in a wooden box, the lid lifting to the smell of new metal. I held the ladder. She held the box of nails. Each time he reached, she set exactly one nail into his wet palm, point up, hammer handle dry, no extra touch. He set a board to replace the bent tin. The hammer struck steady, tuck, 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 carrying bits of broken straw. He came down, stepping on the wet rung, mud clinging to his heel. Didn't scrape it off. He passed the eaves, hung the hammer on a nail, the handle striking it with a dry tink. In the barn, wind slid through the new roof, the tone different, less hiss, less snap. In the loft, the dented tin cup lay still in shadow. A leftover drop of rain slid into it, no sound. The dent darkened, like a wrinkle long made familiar. The quiet night wasn't true. Dry wind, low sky. Near midnight, hoofbeats sounded by the old ditch road. Not fast, not slow, each placed with a space, like someone counting breath. The horse didn't snort. The rider didn't cough. He sat on the eave step, back to the post, rifle inside the house, not in hand. When the hoofbeats neared the yard's edge, he leaned, hand on his knee, not touching the stock. She stood in the doorway shadow, hand on the frame, not gripping. The two children sat inside, eyes open, not leaning out. Their shadow stayed inside the stove's light. The hoofbeats didn't enter the yard, swung along the road outside the fence. The wire gave one notch. The rider didn't stop, only slowed enough to see a corner of the house. The cat caught it before anyone, flicked an ear, stretched. The thin slice of night passed like a fish sliding through a dry ditch, arriving, leaving. The hoofbeats faded toward the mountain. No one followed. No one added a latch. In the barn, the ladder's step gave a single thock, like answering an unasked question. Morning. Dew beaded on the fence edge. The barn gate was still locked, the wood peg shinier from many hands. I went up to check the new roof. The cup was in its place, mouth up, dry. The dent half in light, half in dim. A small strand of hair clung to the rim, darker than tin, loosely twisted. I didn't take it off. In the yard, the hoof marks from the night were shallow, the iron ring touching dry dirt without breaking its edge. One heel print by the fence post, toe toward the mountain. No cigarette butt, no stacked stones, only tracks wiped evenly, not trying to make them new. The scratches stayed, only dust gone. When she came to the stool, she smoothed the edge with the back of her hand, the motion like checking a child's forehead for heat. Said nothing. The two stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at the chairs. The younger touched the back of the flaking painted chair, pulled away at once when the paint stuck to her hand. She licked a speck of paint, wrinkled her face, then smiled with her eyes. The older slid the three-slat chair back a fraction, no sound, sat on the edge, back straight, heels not touching the floor, hands on her knees, palms up, as if waiting for something to be placed there. Nothing was placed. I stood at the threshold. The old stove's warmth still clung, though no fire burned. He pulled out the remaining chair, sat, both hands on the table, 10 fingers spread like a wooden comb, not laced together. She didn't sit right away. She hung the cloth on a nail, stood looking at the 3 chairs for a while. Her eyes went from one backrest to the next, paused at the stool, then returned to the table. On the windowsill, a small salt jar, wooden lid, salt caked at the edge, damp. She tapped the lid lightly with a fingernail. It didn't open. She left it, didn't try harder. On the shelf, a chipped enamel bowl, the chip shaped like a crescent. She turned the crescent inward, then stopped. Sunlight crossed the table's edge, paused on a wood grain like a line of thread. The wind brought the smell of old flour. Outside the barn, the cat jumped to the step, lay across its own shadow. The dented tin cup was still in the loft, as quiet as the house's sound now. No one explained why more chairs were needed. No one named the seats. His boot scraped the chair an inch closer to the table, wood against tile giving a small shirt. A single sound, no length to it. She looked at that sound, the way a person looks at a door closing itself in the wind. The younger slid the stool a notch, smiled with her eyes again. The kitchen grew wider without the walls moving. There was more space for the sound of a spoon to be set down later, for a small hand to touch the table's edge, for a dust mark on the floor to prove someone had stepped there. We stood, sat, breathed in. Dented tin cup hung on a nail beside the main door. The nail new, its head still bright, driven slant into the darkened wood. The cup's handle caught lightly, tilted just enough so when the wind came, the body touched the wall faintly. The dent brightened each time the sun brushed it. The light uneven, sliding across the hollow, then fading, leaving a pale mark like an old scar smoothed flat. No one stood there to look. The cup hung, like something that had settled its place. The step was swept clean. In the corner sat a pair of children's boots, now one size taller, the toes rounder, dusted fine, no longer thick with mud. Beside them, a broom stood straight, the binding replaced, no splinters left to snag anyone's hem. She came out from the kitchen. The cloth hung from a different nail, lower, the cloth dry. Her hand brushed the door, testing the hinge. The sound of wood on wood now smoother, like a person's breath after climbing steps. He had fixed a small brace at the doorframe's foot, blocking the rot. 3 hammer strikes, not hard. Shavings fell, clung to his brown skin, then dropped to the ground. I sat on the stone step outside the eaves, heard the cat under the table, its claws tapping the raised tile. The smell of flour drying from morning lingered. A little of damp iron from the new nail, a little of dry wind from the eastern field. Inside, the table had 3 chairs. The stool set half a handspan out, as if saving room for a small knee. The 3-slat chair facing the window, sunlight cutting across its back to make 3 parallel stripes on the floor. She swept a long stroke from kitchen to threshold, stopping at the step. When the broom's bristles touched the stone lip, the last bit of dust rose and vanished in the light. She didn't look at the cup, didn't need to. It hung there, like the door, like the step, like the nail. Weak wind crossed the yard. The cup's handle shifted once, just slightly. The sound of tin on wood rang, then stopped. Not hollow, not harsh, just enough to be known. Beside the doorway, faint marks where the children had charted their heights in charcoal weeks ago. One lower line, one higher, and one halfway. Metal once pressed, now hung still. Two children played under the eaves. The younger scratched a crooked square into the brick floor with chalk, jumped inside, toes brushing the edge a little, stepped out, smiled with her eyes. The older tied an old rope into a loop, dropped it, pulled it up, tried again, teaching her sister to thread her hand along the easiest path. Their shadows lay in line with their mother's, same length, touching at the step's edge. The mother's shadow shifted when she moved, the two smaller shadows following, never breaking apart. At their meeting point, the dust brightened slightly, as if someone had blown a hand across it. She sat on the highest step, holding someone's shirt, threading a needle. The needle passed through cloth, leaving a small hole that closed again. She bit the thread, the end damp from saliva, pressed it into the fabric's edge. She didn't look much toward the yard. Following the needle's point was enough. He stood in the yard, his back to me. Broad shoulders, brown shirt darkened on the shoulders where pack straps would rub. He held a new piece of wood, measured it by eye, turned it sideways, set it upright, then stopped. Didn't drive it in, didn't bury it, just tested where it might fit. A hawk circled high over the field. Its shadow swept once across the yard, thin as a pen stroke. No one looked up. Only the cat flicked an ear, blinked slow. The younger dropped the chalk. It rolled right to her mother's foot, broke a small piece. She used her thumb to gather the pieces together, set them back in the child's hand. No scolding. The child nodded, as if hearing a sentence with no words. The older lifted the rope upright like a mast, told her sister to step over, not aloud, only with her eyes. The younger lifted her foot. Her dress brushed the rope's edge. The rope quivered slightly. They both watched it, waited. When it stopped, she set her foot down. The game was acknowledged. Near the door, a dry leaf had caught on the cup's nail. She reached, toyed with it until it fell, didn't touch the cup. The leaf landed on the younger's shoe tip. She bent to pick it up, spread her hand as if offering something precious, then handed it to her sister. The sister with her finger, no chalk needed. Her fingertip blackened. She held her hand up, blue, dust lifting into a small cloud. She laughed softly. The older looked at her hand, rolled up her sleeve a notch so it wouldn't brush the fabric. The three shadows still in line. No one ahead, no one hidden. Evening wind crossed the yard. Not harsh, not heavy. A steady run, enough to make what hung sway once, then stop. The cup trembled lightly. The handle touched the wood. The tin's knock against wood was almost unheard, felt more in the teeth clenching slightly, then easing. The dent caught a last streak of day, flared, then went dark. Didn't stay. Dust on the step rose in a thin layer, settled again. The loose thread at the needle's end quivered. The younger lifted her head to follow the quiver, eyes wide, then bent down again. The older laid the rope on the ground, pressed her heel into the knot, testing it tight. The knot stayed silent. He still stood in the yard, hadn't turned, both hands loose, knuckles open, shoulders leaning just enough to match the wind's angle. That stance said no one had to brace for anything now. At the well's edge, the pulley rope hung still, the bucket dry, its rim reflecting a piece of purple sky. Tomorrow's water would be drawn later, not now. In the kitchen, the stove dark, but the tabletop still held a faint wet streak from wiping. The cat shifted, jumped to the second step, curled, tail over eyes. Its ears stayed open. When the cup moved again, the ear twitched, then stilled. No growl, no loud sound. The yard took a breath like someone who had just finished a long sentence without pause. Any passerby would see only a quiet house, a tin cup hanging by the door. No writing on the wall, no wood sign, no carved marks on the tree. Only the dent in the cup was readable. It told enough. Told how it once lay in the loft, once in the kitchen, now hung outside the door. Told in the way the light shifted each time the day made a full turn. Inside, the stool gave a small creak from a hand touching its side. Not to pull it out, just to check if it still wobbled. The hand left, the stool stood. That sound matched the cups, then faded, like two periods side by side even. Like pencil lines straight on a doorframe. Like threads on a tabletop. Like the new fence posts set in place. No one spoke. Mouths opened only to breathe. The story, if there was one, lay in how the cup had chosen its nail, how the hand didn't need to hold, how the knot didn't need tightening. The wind quit, the cup stilled, the light fell. No one spoke, and no one needed to. In the end, there was only the wind across the yard and the dented tin cup hanging from its nail. What had once been in the loft, once in the kitchen, now at the door, not calling out, just changing place. Sometimes healing is like that, putting things back where they belong, fitting the latch to the hand, staying still another night. No one owed anyone bravery, only presence. A loaf of bread on the step, 3 chairs in the kitchen, a rope less frayed, small things, making the house's sound settle lower. If in your life there is also a dented tin cup, an old thing that once burned your hand, then slowly became a sign of safety, write one line under this eve. No need for length, just say where it hangs now. Maybe someone else will recognize their own nail. The dust road is still long. The well's water can wait until tomorrow. Tonight, let the wind take the wind's part. Ours is to leave the door open a hand's width for whoever needs shelter, and keep silent long enough to hear the house answer back.